One of the reasons I love having chili in my freezer is because it makes a quick and easy dinner. I love to cook, but I don't love cooking every single night. If you're new here, welcome to my kitchen. I'm Sarah. I like to make freezer meals. My husband and I, we're a two-person household, and I like to freeze a lot of the food that I make in order to make normal weeknights a lot easier for us at home. Making things from scratch has always been kind of a hobby of mine. I love tweaking recipes, but it was only recently when I started sharing more of my food online that people were actually asking me for the recipes that I made, and I was forced to start writing them down, having them tested by other people, instead of just keeping everything in my head, which is something I'm really grateful for. Now, today I'm gonna make some chili. The last time I made chili was about a year ago, almost exactly to the day. It was last January. I decided to test out this recipe that my sister sent me that she said was the best chili she ever had. Now, I made a couple fatal errors in that recipe. The first being, I thought that chipotle chili powder and chili powder were the same thing. And it turns out that chili powder is actually just a seasoning blend. It often contains dried chilies, but it's not exclusively chilies. And so when I used the chipotle chili powder as a substitute for regular chili powder in this recipe, it turned out way spicier than I would personally like it. So I'm definitely making some tweaks and some adjustments, but I'll tag the original recipe down below. Chili over baked potatoes is one of our favorite meals. Chili on its own is terrific to bring to work for lunch. It's just really versatile, and this recipe makes a lot of food, so I really only have to make chili once or twice a year. That way, whenever the craving hits, I don't have to do this super long, laborious process. So let's get started. You can see I've already done a little bit of ingredient prep here. We're gonna be working with not a traditional mirepoix, but the Holy Trinity, or like a Cajun style mirepoix, which is bell peppers, celery, and onion. It's the same ratio you would use for a traditional mirepoix, which would be celery, carrots, and onion. 1 part celery, 1 part carrot to 2 parts onion. So that's what I have here. I've got 2 cups of onion and 1 cup of diced celery and diced bell peppers. And I'm just getting started on chopping up some bacon. This is gonna go in first and kind of be a seasoning base. We're gonna use the bacon fat to be what we sweat all of our veggies in, and the bacon is gonna impart kind of a smoky flavor. Okay, we're gonna turn on our stove. We've got a 6-quart Dutch oven here. We get our bacon in. Just start to heat that through. Basically going to render all of this bacon fat and crisp it up in the pan, and then we're gonna remove it. We're just continuing to brown this and just keep stirring it. You don't want it to only brown on one side, and you're waiting for it to kind of totally render out its fat. Don't worry if there are little bits stuck to the bottom of the pan. That is delicious flavor. Okay, now that this is pretty well browned, just gonna take this out of the pan. And we're just gonna put our onions straight in. Start sauteing those along with our celery and our bell peppers. One thing I love about this recipe is it just feels so colorful. Like, even for a chili, it does feel like it has a lot of veggies, where I've definitely seen some recipes that only have onion. I'm gonna just season this up a little bit. You always want to season in layers. Let that continue to soften. I'm getting all my other ingredients ready, but I'm just gonna add in the garlic now that these have sauteed down. It's about 6 cloves of garlic, 5 to 6 cloves. Just get that going. And then I've got a whole can of tomato paste going in here, and I wanted to show you a little trick. If you open both ends of a can of tomato paste, you can use one end to push the rest of it through. And then you just gotta pull out that part. But just like that, you pretty much cleared most of the can of tomato paste, and we're just gonna saute this just to get the tomato paste kind of caramelized and cooked out a little bit. That has caramelized quite a bit, and we're gonna add in 1 pound of bulk ground sausage, 2 pounds of ground beef. This is still slightly frozen from the store. Ground beef in, 2nd pound in. This stage is a little bit difficult because basically you've put the tomato paste in, so it's kind of hard to see if the meat is cooked through or not, and it's so much meat. You just kind of got to keep stirring, like let it brown on the bottom for a little bit, then stir. It'll all get cooked. This is going to simmer long enough anyway, but it's a little bit harder to use your normal visual guides for when all of the meat is fully browned. The original recipe has you browning the meat as the first step, but then everything else just kind of gets dumped in. So I prefer to do it this way, but you can kind of just dump it all in if you want, and you want to be sure that the meat was thoroughly browned. The original recipe calls for diced tomatoes, but I only keep whole tomatoes in my pantry. So you could either use crushed, you could use diced tomatoes, or you can just use whole tomatoes and either use an immersion blender or just kind of crush them with your hands and get in there before adding those in. The reason that I only keep canned whole tomatoes in my pantry is because a lot of times diced tomatoes have another ingredient as a preservative in them that helps them hold their shape, but I find that it almost creates a weird firm texture that I don't really love. So I'd rather just keep whole tomatoes in my pantry, and then I can create whatever kind of tomato I like. Of course, I'm not getting a nice little cubed diced up tomato here, but if that's what you prefer, you could use diced tomatoes, or I think fire roasted tomatoes would also be really delicious. Before we add in any more of our wet ingredients, I'm just gonna add in our spices. This is chili powder, smoked paprika, cumin, and oregano. And the chili powder that I got, it actually already has paprika, garlic powder. There's usually a mix in your chili powder, so take a look at that the next time you're going to use it. It could greatly affect, you know, the recipe that you make in the end. But you really want, the reason I'm doing this now is because all of the fat that has released from the meat, I really want to try to get all of those spices toasted in that fat. Just get them in contact with the heat before we add a lot more of our wet ingredients. And I'm going to add back in the bacon that we rendered earlier. I'm going to add in some better than bouillon, just about a tablespoon of this, just to help with the beefy flavor of the chili. Time for our tomatoes. And we've got the rest of our canned ingredients. We're going to use 3 cans of these mild chili beans. So these are already in a sauce that has chili seasoning, garlic, and other spices. You could drain these if you don't want to use the sauce, but since there's not really a lot of other liquid in this, I think the sauce is going to be a nice flavor here. They also make like a spicy version of these canned chili beans. You could use that too if you wanted. Like I said, the first time I made this recipe, I totally made it way too spicy, so maybe I'm being a little bit timid with the heat level, but I don't want it to be so spicy that we don't want to eat it. And that was kind of what happened last time. Okay, so we're at the tippy top almost of my 6-quart Dutch oven. The last of the canned ingredients are going to be some of these chopped green chilies. You could use fire roasted ones if you wanted. This was just what they had at Aldi. So these are also pretty mild, honestly. If you want a spicier chili, by all means, add something with a little bit more heat. Okay, now that everything is in, this is just going to simmer for probably a few hours, but first, just gonna get a little tasting spoon and just kind of see where we're at with the salt level here. Flavor is really good. Gonna add a little bit of kosher salt, not a lot, and some fresh black pepper. Another ingredient that the original recipe had was Worcestershire sauce, but I'm gonna use some fish sauce instead. Fish sauce and Worcestershire sauce have very similar ingredients. You can use whatever you like, or you can omit it. It's not gonna make it taste fishy. It's just gonna enhance the kind of umami flavor of it. I almost forgot, this calls for a couple dashes of hot sauce. It probably calls for like a tablespoon, but I'm just gonna put a little bit in and then taste. You can always make this spicier, but it's much harder to take the spice away. This is really good. It's got a lot of flavor, but not a lot of heat, which is exactly what I wanted. Again, if you wanted a super 5-alarm chili, I'm sure there are recipes out there for you, but if you just wanted a lot of flavor, veggies, and seasoning, but not really a ton of heat, this is kind of what I was going for. I've got some other things I need to do, and so instead of letting this simmer on the stove, I turned the fire off and I'm going to transfer it to the electric base that came with this Instant Pot Dutch oven. I'm going to select braise and press start. The braise function will start it at a bit of a higher temperature and then kind of let it continue to simmer. I can still watch it while I'm doing other things in and around the kitchen, but I can kind of let it be off the stovetop and not have an open flame that I'm super worried about or anything. So this, I'm just gonna leave it uncovered to kind of let it continue to simmer and reduce down and go about the rest of my day. Okay, I literally had this, I've had this going on the braise. The braise cycle took about 2 hours, and then I had to go to a doctor's appointment. So I put the lid on and it's been on keep warm. Keep warm will start counting up. So it's been on keep warm for almost 2 hours now. And this is what the chili looks like. It's been kept at a safe temperature. It is not boiling anymore or simmering. There's definitely a little bit of extra grease at the top that you could skim off if you wanted to, but I'm gonna leave that in. It is rich, it's thick. I'm gonna just give it a little taste. Tasting spoon. You know what, before we go ahead and make dinner, I'm actually going to just portion some out into the trays. I can only fit 2 super cubes in my freezer at any time anyway. And I have a feeling that this is more than 8 cups of chili. So let's just start packing it up and see how much we get. Okay, I've got 2 trays here. Just gonna start ladling in chili. I find that each spoonful of like the super cubes ladle is about half a cup. That's 4 cups right there. Clean this up a little bit. Get a lid on that. This is all I can freeze right now in my freezer, like all I could fit anyway. And that was probably only half of it. So this makes plenty of chili. Okay, we're gonna get our baked potatoes out. These potatoes have been cooking for 2 hours. 2 hours at 400 degrees. Ooh, hot. Gives me a super, super crisp skin. Oh boy. These were a little bit on the small side, so I'm doing 2 potatoes. I'm just gonna do cheese first, and I've got our chili over here. Do a generous helping of chili on top of the baked potato. Of course, can't forget the sour cream and some green onions on top. All right, let's dig in here. Okay, that's so good. Just use that potato skin. In my excitement, I forgot to put butter on mine, but I won't forget for Doug. You know what? I'm gonna cut these on the actual cutting board. It's too hard to do them on the plate. There we go. Salt. Pepper. All right, now I gotta get a second bowl for his chili. All right, our rest of the cheese can go on top of his chili. And that's our dinner. Chili loaded baked potatoes. He's got chili on the side. Thanks for watching.